that's one of the gifts, actually. Mickey squeezed out of us a level of, we have to make this work kind of commitment to us. But that wasn't because we were doing it right. I remember actually saying to Cindy one day, I'm like, do you want me to leave? And she was like, no. And I was like, well, that's how it feels. And we had this sort of conversation. She's like, no, that's never an option. Like the leaving, that's, let's stay inside the container of, we're going to figure this out. And I was like, okay, good. I'm in. And what are we going to do?
Welcome to today's episode of the Forever Change podcast with me, Lisa Strutt. I'm here in the studio with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Linda Miklas, and yes, welcome to this episode of Forever Changed. Today we are joined by Cindi and Chris Mitchell, who are sharing their story from somewhere in Maine in the USA. And we just so appreciate your presence and really look forward to the sharing of your story today.
So, Chris and Cindy, why on earth did you decide to say yes to this Forever Change podcast?
Well, for me, it was intriguing and inspiring to think this way, because I do not only sort of in my own reflection on life look back and see some forever changed moments, but I also think it's a meaningful way for us as human beings to look at our story, to kind of notice those inflection points, and maybe with the butterfly effect, as some people call it, and say, wow, a lot happened because of that one thing. And we've seen that together in our lives in lots of different ways. So we were very inspired by the idea and honored by the invitation.
Brilliant. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of your Forever Changed experience that you want to share with us today, just paint us a picture of who you are and where you are at this moment in your life.
Sure. And I promised Cindy that I would go first and break the ice here. So we are living in central Maine these days. We're both born and raised here in the Northeast. Cindy's originally from New Jersey, and I'm from the Boston area. And we're actually at an interesting part of life right now where I'm just about to retire at the end of the year, and we're shifting from what has been sort of raising family and career building to grandparents and aging parents, and just a whole new chapter for us. But over the course of my career, I think of it in basically two chapters. For the first part of my professional life, I was a pastor, and Cindy and I, we decided when we were young and crazy that we would start
Right.
a congregation that we thought was sort of like a church for people who don't like church. And that was a great experience. We loved that. And then when we came to the end of that chapter at about 20 or so years in, I decided I wanted to become an undercover pastor. And by that, I meant I wanted to be a thought partner in people's growth, but not necessarily part of the institutional and formal religious framework, but instead just kind of come into the business world and work with folks that way. And so I ended up becoming an advisor and executive coach with FMG Leading. I've been there for 10 years. It's been an amazing gift and a wonderful experience for me. And then I'll just add, on a personal level, we have 3 kids, 3 adult children, Kaylee, Jess, and Mickey. Kaylee's 34, Jess is 32, and Mick is going to be 30 soon. And then we have 2 grandkids. Abby's 5 and Will is 2. And then we have a grand dog, Mowgli. He's 4-ish.
Wow. I love that phrase, undercover pastor. So intriguing. So many questions going through my mind. We'll hold fire on those. Cindy, what about you? Do you see it in 2 chapters as well, or is it a different format for you?
It's definitely 2 chapters for me as well. Maybe 3 at this point. I think early on it was all about kids and raising the kids and being present for them. And I loved being a mom, and that was my priority. So I kind of fit in work and earning some money around being a mom and full time in that capacity. And one of the things that was given to me as an opportunity, I guess they were in junior high, maybe. Um, I had I had been introduced to a couple who were coming to our church, and one of them was a member of the New England Patriots football team, and we became fast friends. And so when he was starting his nonprofit for at-risk boys, he was needing help administratively, and so he asked if I would be his sort of assistant and help him in that endeavor. And so I guess that was back in, uh, I don't know, 2006, I think it was. So I became his assistant, but then I kind of moved into a role of helping him administratively with the nonprofit organization by doing fundraisers and just sort of being his sidekick, I guess, helping him with all of those events and helping him with communications with people. And that was very, very rewarding for me. And it allowed me to be flexible and home with the kids. And so I did that for about 14 years. And then I decided I wanted to be out on my own and to start a health coaching business. So I went back to school and got certified as an integrative health and wellness coach. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years until recently when we moved up to our lake house, which is in Vienna, Maine. And Chris decided he was going to pull back a little bit from work. And so I decided that we were going to just focus on um, our relationship and our grandkids and traveling and sort of that last chapter. So I think early on it was just all kids, and then it was my career sort of with the football player, and then um my own health coaching business, and which is now sort of fading out. So that's where we're at here now.
Well, I love the fabulously non-linear nature to that as you told it and it unfolded. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks, Cindy and Chris. For our listeners, we have been friends for a very long time, and I have had the gift of getting to witness some of these chapters in motion and being on the receiving end of their generosity and friendship. And Cindy, when I hear you talk about your health coaching business, I can't think about that and not think about the conversation over coffee we had like years before that, when you were just starting to imagine that at some moment in time you really wanted to focus on women and health, and to see that the path that you followed to bring that into reality was really inspiring. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Love you guys.
Thank you, Linda. You were very inspirational to both of us for helping us to map out the direction that we were going to go in. And so we are so grateful for your
You could have
guidance.
easily, actually, I didn't think of this until right now, but Linda, you could have been our forever changed moment, but we
Oh.
didn't want to like double layer things on
That would have
top
been
of
so
things.
cheesy, but really lovely. And thank you for saying that. All right. Well, that sounds like a very nice segue into Forever Changed. Before we invite you to share your story, just kind of, Chris, you alluded to this a little bit, but what does Forever Changed mean for you? When we presented you with that concept, and you said, "Yeah, I think we'll do this." What came to mind when you thought about this concept of Forever Changed?
You want to go first?
I think I mean, it's very intriguing for me because actually I've had a similar conversation with one of my best friends growing up from New Jersey. And we were talking about when her mom passed away very suddenly and tragically, and how that has changed her so drastically. And then I shared my story. We were talking about my story, which we're going to go into a little bit later. And we've been talking about that now for 5 or 6 years, and how impactful it is to have something particular happen that actually changes the trajectory of your life. And it's very profound and it's very meaningful, and it's very um I think important to share with other people so that perhaps they can be more um aware of those moments, because it doesn't have to be this humongous, uh I don't know, lightning bolt coming out of the sky moment, but just even these series of moments that are tied together that could be changing. I just think the whole idea is very intriguing, and I love to talk about it. So I'm happy to share some of ours.
Yeah, and I think for me, the forever change concept is it's a very cool confluence of, kind of the ordinary, just muddling through the day to day, and you never really know when you're gonna bump into one of these moments. And then also, Cindy talked about that kinda lightning strike, and those happen as well. But I mean, in full candor, I think looking back at our lives, we have as many forever changed moments that were part of the ordinary, like a conversation on what we should do next, or the extraordinary, which was one of the stories that we saved for this interview. And I think to remember that these forever changed moments are always sort of intruding into our lives is incredibly it's motivating, because you just never know what today is going to bring, and what kind of hindsight 20 years out from now will will look back at this particular day. um and that's just a very cool thing to kind of wrap our heads around.
What a brilliant description. I have to tell you, Chris, I have goosebumps right now this minute just hearing you say that. And maybe there's something about being in midlife or a different stage in life that gives you the benefit of that hindsight approach, that lens to look back on the
Yep.
ebb and flow of life and take some time to reflect and notice how you got to where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
All right. Well, are you ready to dive in to your forever changed story that you will be blessing us with today?
We're ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So take us back to the beginning that you want to start at, even no matter where that is.
I would say there was a moment when, I guess, just to put it in like a real storytelling lens, driving home from work one day, and there's just this little boy in the road, right near my driveway. And I'm thinking, first of all, I don't know who this little boy is. And secondly, why is he just sitting in the street? And that was my introduction to Mickey, who is now our 30-year-old son. But at the time, he was just a 5-year-old stranger. And when we first met Mick, he was just in a very difficult situation with his siblings and with his mom. And to make a very long story short, I mean, we could tell a 4-hour version of this story, if not longer, because there's just so much to it. About a month and a half later, social services was knocking on our door and saying, "Hey, there's a little boy over there in that house a few doors down who has pointed at your house and said, 'Can I live with them?'" And that moment of needing to give Walter, was his name, Walter, an answer, was the beginning of our family. Me, Cindy, our 2 girls, and frankly, our German Shepherd, Ginger, too. But we were forever changed by that experience. Sid, I don't know if you wanna
Well,
add anything to that.
my part of the story actually goes back about 6 months prior. I was thinking about it, and this is this it still affects me to this day, because I had a very vivid dream. And the dream was that I had was walking down a hill towards a department store, and there was sort of a rotating doorway, and there was sort of a platform in front, of the department store, and there was a little boy crunched up, all curled up in a ball, and there was a homeless man standing over him, and the little boy was crying, crying, crying. And when I got to the door, I asked the homeless man, I said, "Where is this little boy's mother?" And the homeless man said he doesn't have a mother. And then the little boy jumped into my arms and he wrapped his legs and his arms around me and he was crying, crying, crying. And then I started crying. And then the homeless man said, he he doesn't have a mother, but you could be his mother. And that was the end of and then I was just crying, embracing this little boy, crying, crying, crying. And I woke up and I was out of breath and my heart was racing as if I had this horrible nightmare, just sort of like that physical response. And I could not shake it. I could not, I was like, what in the world? Why was that so jarring to me, that particular dream? And so then the next morning I went down, my mother-in-law was living in the in-law apartment down below us, and I told her the dream, and I was like, "That's so strange. I just can't get it off I can't shake it." I kind of still felt that physical response. And then sure enough, like forgot about it. But then as we were introduced to this to Mick, about 6 months later in the summertime, and he started coming to our house, riding his bike to our house and wanting to play on our swing set. And we didn't know this boy. We didn't know what was going on. And we thought it was dangerous that he was there um, trying to play on our play set without us around. So decided to say, we're going to go ask your mom if you can be here. And he said, no, 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 don't talk to my mom. And I said, "Well, I kinda need to. I just want her to call me. If you wanna come over, you're welcome to play." And sure enough, when I went to speak with her, it was very clear that she wasn't very present, and, um, it was not a good situation at home. So he was about 3 doors down. And so after that, though, he kept showing up at our house and wanting food and wanting to play and wanting to play with the dogs. And we just couldn't turn him away, and we just took him in and just gave him food and just gave him love. And so then fast forward about a month and a half later, DSS was about to remove him from the home because there was neglect, and there was all kinds of things, 51As filed against the mom. And the the social worker knocked on our door and said, "This little boy is going to be removed from his home, and he has identified you as a safe family. And it's unprecedented. We don't usually do this, but would you be willing to take him in as your foster son until we can figure things out?" And we were just floored because we were not expecting that. We were happy with sort of where our family was at, two girls, and that was the way it was going to be. But um, yeah, he came literally to our doorstep, and um it was sort of a long process from there of caring for him and trying to figure out what was going to happen with his mom and his biological father. And um it was about a 2-year process of fostering him. But the one moment, I'll hand over to Chris, that we sort of zeroed in on that was life changing was when we decided to sit down with our two girls and explain the situation and talk to them about the possibility of bringing him into our home.
Yeah, we had the habit of family meetings. That sounds more formal than it really was. It was just like every once in a while we had to kinda corral the chaos and have a conversation. And, our daughters were 9 and 7 at the time, and so we decided, if we were gonna do this, it should be all 4 of us. And so we explained the situation to the girls, and our youngest at the time was 7, Jessa, and she had a very interesting question. She said, "Well, what happens if we say no?" And we were like, "Hmm, well, if we say no, he's not gonna have a family for a little while, maybe even a long time." She said, "Well, okay, then we should do it." And there was something just so clear about the okay, then we should do it coming from the lips of a 7-year-old girl that just made it unmistakable for us.
Well, and at the time too, I remember having many conversations with my in-laws who were living downstairs and about the possibility of doing this. And originally they were going to take him in, but it didn't seem feasible for that to happen because he wanted to be with us, with the younger kids and the dog. And so we kind of like together were trying to decide on this. And then my mother-in-law said, "Oh my goodness, Cindy, do you remember your dream?" And I just about fell on my knees because I hadn't remembered it until she brought it up to me. And I just fell to my knees. And I remember sitting on the couch with Chris and crying so hard that I just lost my breath. And that's exactly what had happened in the dream. I was crying so hard that I kind of lost my breath, which is what woke me up. And so it was just so crazy, sort of this, how that all happened and how real it was to me, and how I felt like that was such a clear sign to me that I had to pay attention to, and with the input from our children as well, because both Kaylee and Jessa were both very compassionate, and although they were scared because he was a
He's a wild animal.
very difficult child. I mean, clearly he didn't have supervision for the first 5 years of his life.
Yeah.
And he wasn't our girls were so easy, and they just it was something that I was very afraid to introduce this outside influence into their world because I didn't know how it would turn out. Um, but it was we at the time we just thought this it was the right thing to do. And so we made a decision as a family that we would do it. And it was not easy. It was just the most difficult thing that I'd ever experienced in my life. Those first 12 years
Yeah.
of trying to undo the pain and the neglect and all the things that were, um, you know, wrapped into this child, unfortunately, at such a young age. It was excruciating. And we had police come to our house. We had
More than
incidents
once.
more than once because of, the things that he had done in school. Or, I mean, we just were trying every which way. And it
Well,
seemed
to
like,
be fair, Sin, let me cut in for a second, because one time the police came because Cindy and I had miscommunicated. I thought she was home, she thought I was home, and we both left. And so there was Mickey alone in the
Oh, no.
house, and we had taught him to call 911 if he was ever in trouble. So he called the police and he said,
Oh, no.
"Hello, my name is Mickey Mitchell, and there are no parents here."
I had run to the grocery store, came back, there was a police car in my ear. I'm like, what is happening? Yeah. So
It was like, "Oops,
that was
sorry
our
about
fault
that."
for the police,
Yeah.
That's great.
But no, other times were serious matters that we had to deal with. And I remember sitting on our swing on our porch and crying, 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 and saying, "I can't do this. I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. I don't know how to do this." But we just, we realized that this child was pushing every button to the limit to see if we would persevere. I don't know what, but we did. And we had absolutely a village around us of family, our church family, um, friends that just absolutely took Mickey under their wing, all the school administration. We just felt like there was angel after angel after angel in
Yeah.
his life that were helping us help him.
Yeah.
And we couldn't have done it without all these characters and all these people that were so significant to us and to him. And it really, I mean, the way that he is living his life today is a testament to love and the choice of love and the choice of persevering love, actually, is really
Yeah.
because it didn't feel like love. it felt like something else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I think actually we put that in the form, if I remember right. Like one of the ways to think about how Mickey helped us is he redefined love for us. And it came out of the kind of bubbly, suburban, 2 kids and a dog, let's live a happy life, love each other, it's bedtime, sweetheart, see you in the morning kind of feel, to painful, sacrificial, tenacious. We were like, "Is this what love feels like? Because it feels horrible."
Wow. So many questions. And I think the listeners to this podcast are people who are interested in human story and the wrestling that we do with day-to-day stuff. And you've painted such a vivid picture of that time and some of the struggles. Like how did you said about those pep talks and times you had to buoy each other up? Paint the picture of like day to day. How did you actually get through that? Because there must have been times when you just thought, yeah, are those people telling the truth? Should we have really done this? But you kept going. How did you
Yeah.
manage that day to day?
Um, a couple things come to mind. One is if go back and layer on another kind of level of candor around those pep talks, because sometimes those pep talks were knockdown, drag out fights. And I thought she was doing it wrong, and she thought I was doing it wrong, and I needed more from her, and she needed more from me. And why did we do this? And so, you know, certainly looking back, most of it was pep talky. Some of it was really, really difficult disagreements between, and I think that was probably fear. That was like, we both realized, okay, we're in over our heads and we're afraid of the outcome. And I think that a couple things really helped there. Number one was we had a couple years before that started to go to a marriage therapist that was super helpful in helping us understand how to do conflict. Because we met each other when I was 15 and she was 16, and we had a lot of those old teenage habits. So we didn't fight so well, and that bubbled up. And that's one of the gifts actually. Mickey squeezed out of us a level of mm, I don't even know the right word, but a level of sort of like, we have to make this work kind of commitment to us. But that wasn't because we were doing it right. That was just because, I remember actually saying to Cindy one day, I'm like, do you want me to leave? And she was like, no. And I was like, well, that's how it feels. And we had this sort of conversation. She's like, no, that's never an option. Like the leaving, let's stay inside the container of we're going to figure this out. And I was like, okay, good. I'm in. And what are we going to do? I mean, what are we going to do? And it was right around then, actually, it was probably within that year that Mickey turned a corner. And so this had nothing to do with us, as far as I can tell. But when he was 15, there was a night that he walked down the stairs and he had a different look on his face. And he said, Dad, can I talk to you? And I said, absolutely, sit down. And so he sat next to me on the couch and he said, lately, I've been really scared about hurting myself. And I'm wondering if you would come to therapy with me and help me talk about that. I said, I'm more than happy to do that. And that was the beginning. That moment was when he really turned a corner. And I'm sure there's some developmental stuff that was happening as he was getting older. But also now we had a decade of persevering, tested love that he could count on. He had a track record with us. And that therapist was like, all right, let's do it. And so the three of us rolled up our sleeves. And for the next couple of years, we had a lot of conversations until one day Mickey uninvited me from therapy, which I was happy to graduate from that.
well, and I think too, it's really important because I always sort of look at the turning point when Chris went to therapy with him and really sort of just dove into walking beside him figuratively and physically.
Yeah.
And he made a commitment that he was just all in with Mickey and Dad um walking together, and they would physically walk every time Mickey was struggling. They would just Chris would say, "Let's go walk," and they would walk and walk and walk
Miles.
and miles and miles and talk, and it was just a great, amazing thing to see the transformation once I think Mickey really, really started to trust, especially you.
Yeah.
Um, he had told me early on, I was the brunt of Mickey's rage, because he came right out and said, "I hate mothers. I hate them because they leave you." And he was talking about his mother, and so he just projected all of that onto me early on for years, actually. But that was when he said, I just hate mothers. I just don't, and it was good that he articulated that, but at the same time I thought, okay, now what do I do? And that's when Chris sort of stepped in and said he needs me to just take over and, focus on him. And I feel like that's where a lot of the transition happened for him, was that real intentional focus from Chris on getting into his heart and his mind. And yeah, he is now so incredible. He's amazingly gifted in so many different ways. He's funny, he's very loving and caring. He gives me big hugs. He says, "I love you, Mom." It's everything that we ever hoped for but never thought we'd ever achieve back then. We just always thought, if this kid gets through high school without hurting himself or other people, we will say it's a win.
Yeah.
That's all we were hoping for.
Yeah, I remember saying to a friend, I'm like, my parenting objective with him is keep him out of jail, keep him from hurting someone or himself. That's it. That's all I really cared about. And the fact that he's turned into a young man who not only does he not hate his mother anymore, but she's the one who gets all the schmaltzy texts and the heart emojis, and he's going through a breakup. She gets the call. I don't
Right.
hear any of that stuff.
That is
Yes,
such.
I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful to finally have a relationship with him that I never, ever, ever thought that I would have. So
Yeah, I just get such a like the phrase that keeps coming into my head is just unconditional love.
Oh yeah.
It's what you've described exemplifies that. And I'm
Yeah.
curious to know what your wee pep talks for each other are like now. You don't have to answer that question, but I just wondered how it changed how you interact with each other.
oh well, we've gone to a deep dive over the last 10 years, I would say, into self-awareness and IFS therapy. I don't know if you know what that is, but really digging deep, and it's it's helped us to see sort of the the inner children parts that we all have, that and now we see it too in our kids, and Mickey in particular too, and it's helped us to um have compassion for all of these parts that were wounded when we were younger. And so we have really deep conversation. I feel like our experience with our children, and not just Mickey, but all three of them, and everything that they have taught us, has helped us to sort of go deeper into what we were thinking, feeling when we were younger. And that helps us now as we have conversations, when we have difficult conversations, to see it differently and to have a lot more compassion for one another's struggles. And I feel like everything that we went through with our kids has contributed to us being the strong, resilient couple that we are today, for sure. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, was so many ways to answer that question, but the one that's coming to mind right now is there was something about that little bubble that we had when it was just the four of us, and there was sort of this naive, almost an arrogant understanding of, okay, we figured this out. We know how to be a good family. And and I'm not sure that that kind of thought is necessarily the one that puts you on a good path, right? It makes you kind of certain, and you're a knower instead of a learner, and kind of look at other people and say, why don't they get their shit figured out? And that was starting to creep in, frankly, for me. And so I think one of the things that Mickey taught me is I just really don't know what I'm doing. And especially when I think I know, like, hey, I know how to be a dad, I know how to be a husband. But then in reality, it's like, I really don't. I mean, I know a few things. I can get sort of into the platform, but in terms of like building on that, that takes a lot more humility and and curiosity than I had. And Mickey squeezed that out of me for sure. And I've said that to him before. And he said, I don't know what that means yet. I don't, when you say I taught you that you didn't really know, but you thought you knew. Um, he's like, I don't really know what you mean. And just always smile and say, you will
Yeah, right,
one day
right.
you'll know what I mean by that.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. That is so powerful in and of itself, and the willingness and generosity of telling us this story is so incredible. I kind of want to go back to one piece. You've said it, so I'm not asking you to define something new, but just share with us again, kind of uh, that continuum of love, right? Kind of your understanding and beliefs about love, before Mickey, and then in the midst of, the newness of and continuation of those first few years with Mickey, and then now, like, I'd just love to hear that.
I remember like watching the Brady Bunch and thinking, that's how you do it. And so I wanna be that. I wanna do that. And I say that it's like almost like a fun little Gen X memory, but it was real for me. Whether it was the Brady Bunch or, um, Cosby Show or any of those sort of like family friendly. I remember as a kid thinking, "That's what it looks like." And so I went into my own family. We had Kaylee when I was 21 and Cindy was 22. It was like right away when we got married. And, I was like, "Okay, that's what we're gonna build. Like, I'm not gonna be an architect, but I'm gonna be Mike Brady, and you're gonna be
Nice.
Carol, and we're gonna figure this out." And the thing about the Brady Bunch is the problems are always solved in 22 minutes plus commercials. Do the right
Yes.
thing, have the hard conversation, and then everybody's happy. And I naively, subconsciously took that into family and love. So that's on one end of the spectrum, is sort of young. That was the best I could do at the time. I don't judge myself for that definition of love. But then what Mickey brought in is, well, no, sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes it's much harder and much more painful than what you could have ever imagined. But the idea of love is that you stay with it anyway. I'm thinking that Martina McBride song. You do it anyway. And she's just sort of, the crescendo of then this happens, but you do it anyway, and you do it. And that's what Mickey did, is he took me from this sort of naive Brady Bunchy look at love and family over to, I have no idea what the outcome will be, but I'm not going anywhere. And that's the other end of the spectrum, right? And the the way from one to the other is, it's a constant like unraveling of the old way of thinking and then stepping in. And the interesting thing is, as much as there is deeper pain and sacrifice as you move along that spectrum, there's also greater reward, because there's no way that anything else in our lives, and our girls have said the same thing. There's nothing like Mickey. It's why it was such an easy story to tell here. Like, he was the greatest gift ever given to us because of all of what we learned about him and us and love and life, etc. And so all that pain, all those tears, um, they they gave us, the five of us, something that we could never get otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think early on you're just trying to survive. You're going day in and day out and just doing your thing, and you love each other, and uh but it's more of a um I don't know, I guess, that tender feeling of, belonging, and that's always there. Um, but I never imagined until Mickey came into our family that love would be so gritty. I feel like it introduced a kind of grit and resilience, and um I don't know what other word to throw in there, but that to me is so it's raw and it's meaningful, and I feel like because of that experience I've had sort of a real deeper view of um relationships and commitment and perseverance and all those things because of that experience. So, before you just kind of la 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 going along, and you think you know love and you think you know how to love your kids, but then you have this thrown into the mix and you say, wow, I guess loving your kids is a lot grittier, a lot more raw, a lot more complicated and far reaching than we ever knew. And so that's part of that knowing that I think Chris was talking about, is before that you just didn't know what you don't know, and then all of a sudden you experience this and you're saying, "Oh my goodness, like this is depth," and I appreciate that because I feel like it's given me a a lens to see, you know, to work with my clients and with a lens that is so much deeper and you know, um wide and um more compassionate, I guess. And I appreciate it. I'm thankful that we had that experience as hard as it was, and I think the girls say the same thing. We all say it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. You've given us so much food for thought, and it's made me think of a time after my late husband John died when he was 47 of pancreatic cancer. And I remember my youngest, who was a teenager at the time, and she was really struggling and with lots of different feelings and experiences and loss and grief and anger and all those sorts of things that you can imagine. And I remember one day in a fit of anger and rage, she said to me, I wish it was you that had died and not dad. And that's just, when your kids say things to you and it cuts you in two. And, you talked about those sorts of things. And yet love endures, and unconditional love beyond those things, because there's a child in there hurting and suffering, and you get to be a part of that and to be there, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Such a powerful story and such a generous gift. Thank you guys.
Is there a wisdom? I mean, you've shared already many golden nuggets of wisdom, but is there something like a phrase or something that you use, a piece of wisdom that you would like people to take away from having encountered you?
As much as this sounds so obvious and cliche, I still think that many of us, much of the time, don't do it, and that would be ask for help. And because of fear and shame and overwhelm, a lot of times we just put our head down and try to do it ourselves, and we could have never done. And to this day, we can't do life without just asking for help.
And also I think I would say that there is a wisdom that is within every one of us, I think, that we have to sort of practice breaking it open and getting quiet and still so that you can hear that wisdom. And I think that all along the way that we had to tap into that wisdom to figure out what the next turn was going to be. But we couldn't do it unless we were intentional about it. And so I really believe that everyone has it, it's a practice to find it. So find it.
Absolutely. Well, that's such a great message for our listeners who will be possibly forever changed, or at least initially invited, to go down a path that maybe they've been considering, but have been afraid to do so. So, so many ways that our listeners will benefit. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Forever Changed podcast. Thank you to Cindi and Chris Mitchell for sharing their Forever Changed story with us today.